She was 47, and the vines were heavy with the weight of another harvest. Margaret Hale stood at the edge of her family's vineyard in Napa Valley, the late afternoon sun bleeding gold across the rows of Cabernet Sauvignon. At her feet, the earth was rich and forgiving, unlike the man who had planted the seeds of her ruin 20 years ago. The air smelled of fermented grapes and regret, hers mostly. But tonight, that would change. In 2005, when they were both 27, Thomas Blackwood had been the rising star sommelier from a rival winery in Sonoma. Charismatic, with a laugh like rolling thunder and hands that knew the curve of a wine glass better than a lover's waist. Margaret was the enologist, fresh from UC Davis, her passion for terroir as fierce as her unrequited love for him. They met at a trade fair in San Francisco. He poured a flawed Pinot Noir. She critiqued it with a smile that hid her crush. By summer, they were stealing nights in hidden cellars, whispering dreams over bottles of experimental blends. He promised her the world, a joint label, a life intertwined like rootstock and graft. "You're the vintage I'll never outgrow," he'd said, his breath warm against her neck. Then came the betrayal. Thomas's family winery was crumbling under debt. He needed capital, fast. Margaret's father, old Elias Hale, had just inherited the vineyard from his own father, a sprawling 200 acres that had survived prohibition through sheer stubbornness. Thomas proposed marriage, not for love, but for the deed. When she said yes, he bedded her that night in the barrel room. But the morning after, he forged her signature on a power of lawyer document, siphoned funds from the vineyard's accounts to save his own legacy, and vanished to Europe with his ex-fiancée, a French heiress who'd always eyed his charm like a rare Bordeaux. Margaret discovered it all on her wedding day. No groom at the altar in the vineyard chapel, just a notary with papers that stripped her family of everything. The lawsuit drained what little was left. Elias died of a broken heart 6 months later, leaving Margaret to claw back the land through sheer will and a small investor's mercy. She rebuilt, acre by punishing acre, turning Hale Vineyards into a boutique powerhouse known for its bold, unyielding reds. Men came and went, divorced executives, widowers seeking solace, but none stayed. Her heart had soured like overripe fruit. Now, in 2025, the email arrived like a ghost from a forgotten cellar. Subject: one last toast. Dearest Maggie, the cancer's back. Stage 4 this time. Months if I'm lucky. I've spent years regretting the vineyard I stole, and the woman I left barren. I'm in Napa for treatment at UCSF. If you'll have me, I'd like to make amends. Dinner? The French Laundry, my treat. No expectations. Thomas, she read it in the tasting room, surrounded by oak barrels stamped with her label. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the clarity of 20 years' vintage rage. She replied yes, attaching a photo of the 2005 harvest, her first solo vintage, labeled Resilience. The dinner was exquisite, as expected. Thomas looked hollowed out, his once vibrant face etched with jaundice, but his eyes still sparkled with that old arrogance. He ordered the full tasting menu, reminiscing about their nights, blaming his youth, his family's pressure. I loved you, Maggie. Truly. I just panicked. She nodded, sipping her own Hale Reserve, letting him talk. Midway through the foie gras, he slid a folder across the table, legal papers transferring his Sonoma estate, a modest 50 acres, to her name. It's nothing compared to what I took, but it's a start. For us? Twist 1, the gift. Margaret's laugh was soft, like the fizz of a sparkling rose. For us? Oh, Thomas. There is no us. But I'll take the land. It's poetic, your roots feeding mine. He beamed, mistaking relief for forgiveness. Over the next week, as he underwent chemo in the city, she visited him in his rented villa overlooking the bay. She brought bottles of her best, the '05 Resilience, a 15 blend called Betrayal, dark, tannic, unforgiving. They talked legacy, loss, the what-ifs. He confessed the French heiress had left him broke and bitter, his winery sold off piecemeal. "You're the success story I dreamed for us," he said one evening, his hand on hers. She let it linger, her mind on the real estate attorney she'd hired that morning. The transfer was clean. His desperation made him sloppy with the signatures. But as the days blurred into a second week, doubt crept in like vineyard mildew. Thomas rallied, the treatment working better than expected. He started talking future. "We could merge the estates. Hail Blackwood. Our second chance." Margaret smiled, but inside, the plan soured. Killing him with kindness wasn't enough. He was clawing back, infecting her victory. Twist 2, the resurgence. One night, after a particularly lucid ramble about their lost child, the one she miscarried in the grief of his abandonment, he pulled out a faded sonogram photo. "I kept it. Our little vine that never grew." Lies, she knew, he'd never known. But it cracked something in her. Was this love's final cruelty, or his masterstroke? She left early, drove back to the vineyard under a storm-lashed sky, and poured herself a glass of the 05. As thunder rolled, she realized revenge wasn't destruction. It was reclamation. The following afternoon, she returned to the villa with a proposal of her own. "Let's celebrate the merger," she said, uncorking a special bottle, a custom blend she'd commissioned years ago, labeled Absolution. It was exquisite, notes of black cherry, vanilla, and something sharper, almost medicinal. Thomas drank deeply, toasting to new beginnings. They made love on the terrace, slow and tentative, his frailty making it feel like absolution. But as the sun dipped, he clutched his chest, gasping. "Maggie, what?" "It's nightshade extract," she whispered, steady as she held the glass to his lips one last time. "From the wild edges of my vineyard. You stole my harvest, now you join it." His eyes widened, not in anger, but understanding. "You planned this?" Twist 3, the truth unveiled. As he slipped away, Margaret confessed everything. The sonogram? A forgery she'd planted in his effects via a private investigator, to test his remorse. The land transfer? It came with a clause she'd slipped in, upon his death, full ownership, no strings. And the cancer? She'd known for months. His email was intercepted and resent from her own account, luring him back. He'd never left Europe willingly. Her PI had ensured his debts mounted until he had to return, desperate for her fortune. "You were always the planner," he murmured, his voice a wheeze. "I just poured the wine." She kissed his forehead as the light faded from his eyes. "And I fermented the poison." The official report, cardiac arrest from metastatic spread. No autopsy, his body donated to science, per his wishes, she'd forged in the villa's safe. Margaret absorbed the Sonoma acres seamlessly, rebranding it Hail Blackwood, a legacy reclaimed. At the launch tasting, held under string lights in the merged vineyards, she poured the 05 resilience for investors and old flames alike. Toasts rang out to second chances, but in her glass, she saw only the shadow of the man who'd taught her love's sharpest edge. That night, alone in the barrel room where it all began, she raised a solitary glass. "To the unrequited," she whispered. "May it always ripen into something unbreakable."